Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Remember to be on this side.
Yeah, turn your laptop maybe a little.
Well, can you still see anything if you move the camera, your camera more forward?
No, because it cut off the TV. I gotta close my lid somewhat. I'm not having anything all day. It's weird. I'm gonna wait until after. I'm gonna enjoy it.
You could probably move that slide. Which one do you want?
What?
You gotta know.
I'm just gonna We just lost to it, even though it started.
Texting. How long are you gonna stand there?
We're gonna start in 1 minute.
1 minute? Oh, is that the time frame? We'll get a refill. You're gonna learn this. They're getting beer refills. You guys need a refill before we get started?
Not yet. This has been bothering me.
What?
Man?
What? What are you gonna do?
Come on. What are you trying to do?
Stop looking. It's fine.
There's so many errors. I can only catch so many.
Just sit down if you want to. Hey, my goodness.
I know it was from F5
Well, he wanted to call it how to make it not suck. I was like, that's probably not appropriate.
Yeah. I think this crowd wouldn't mind, but
Try to keep it family friendly.
yeah, you never know. It might be like an 18-year-old here.
We're definitely walking wherever we're eating.
I guess I'm also do adult supervision. I'm the only one out of the three of y'all who are not drinking.
Just because you don't like beer.
Well, exactly. They don't have any Fireball.
I feel like that needs to be in how not to make it terrible.
I really wanted to say how to make it not suck.
That's what I thought it was.
Yes, but I was told I need to make it PG.
Is like,
And that's what I was telling my mom. I was like,
you're splitting the inside.
Right.
Exactly.
What?
I'm splitting an offender. He pointed out, and he's correct. He doesn't care about
Control.
Well, it's like I'm writing a book, so it's like I try to stay mindful of stuff.
Oh, I'm terrible at written grammar.
Right? Yeah, it's tricky.
spoken.
If you don't like consciously aim to.
How is this still alive?
It's not big yet, is it?
It's a low percent, right?
Yeah, right. Basic. Alright, let's go. I was gonna say, now that your title screen's ready.
Let's analyze the next slide.
Actually, I already got two out there waiting in line. There is no line, so. Yeah.
So like, I think the shop is open on 9 to 5, Monday through Friday.
Saturday.
So you got people coming in doing things?
That's a headache. That's why I'm like,
You want to drive in there?
front desk, so that way I'm gonna be there all the time, be off the job site.
Yeah. So you do all stuff on your own?
That's why they make
got
more than
probably 2 makers that, depending on what the project is, whether it's woodworking, that are on
You're allowed to, yeah, there's a certain amount you're allowed to put in.
I mean, it's like your full-time job.
Here a few months, I might do a presentation on home automation. I got parts coming in.
No,
I'm going to use assist.io.
But you ain't done, it comes into like, you throw your wallet, or the wallet, you want to, usually, it's pretty good.
There's nothing that's out there that'll
Win-win, it's like,
work like a good machine.
you just stand up and it's like, what are
Depending on what you're doing, like, Google Sheets has served all my needs.
Well, it's a good to view a worksheet. But I'm going to get in there and work around and do a lot of in-depth stuff.
But I mean, so I expected, actually, I expected
Ready?
Let's
get this thing started.
All right, everybody. Today we got Zach Underwood over here to talk about open source Wi-Fi and how to make it not terrible.
Well, okay, it's not quite open source, but it's more about an overview of Wi-Fi and how to not make it suck. I couldn't make that the official title, but that's the running title. So an overview of myself, Zach Underwood, of course. This past June was the 5th year I did the networking for the Southeast Linux Fest, which is held up in Charlotte every June. It's about 800 people get together and talk about open source. And I run with the help of Jacob, we run the network, and this year we even took over AV. I used to work at a wireless ISP, so our primary way of delivering internet to end users was using wireless. They were based out of downtown Greenville, and our network covered Greenville, Pickens, and part of Spartanburg County. I have a Linux network background. I work as a sysadmin / network engineer on a day-to-day basis. Right now I'm actually a DDoS specialist with Arbor, and I'm also a Red Hat certified engineer. So what's the difference between 2.4 and 5? You hear about dual band and everything. 2.4, generally you'll see it in 20 megahertz channels. So that's basically how much of the spectrum you use at any given time is 20 megahertz. It does support 40 megahertz, but you should never use it. Because within the US, we have 11 channels that we can use in Wi-Fi in 2.4, 1 through 11. However, when you use channel 1 and 2, they overlap. The frequencies, the center of the frequencies will overlap with the frequency of the next one to it. So there's only 3 non-overlapping channels in 2.4. It's 1, 6, and 11. Unfortunately, when you use 40 megahertz, there's only 2 channels in the entire spectrum, and you'll get interference from everyone. 2.4 generally has a longer range, but that's not always a good thing. Yes, it can reach out longer, but you can also hear other people's 2.4 from a further distance. And if you're in like an apartment complex or a downtown area like here, there's a lot of 2.4 noise because it travels so far. It's also considered legacy by a lot of us in the wireless. It's the trash band. That's where all your crappy devices that haven't upgraded, the old legacy devices that you just kind of want to get rid of. They typically live in 2.4. And noise. It has a higher noise level, so what that means is there's more interference on any given channel in 2.4. And to make Wi-Fi good, you need a certain, it's called signal to noise ratio. So it's basically the signal is how much you hear it, how much noise you have from next door, and it's the difference between that which is basically how well you connect. So the greater the distance between your noise and what you hear, the better you're off. So if you increase your noise level, you can only increase your signal so much before you start squeezing out, and the difference between your noise and signal degrades to a point where it's unusable. 5 gigahertz. It is commonly used in 20, 40, and 80 megahertz channel sizes. And 5 gigahertz is a lot more spectrum that can be used. So instead of just 1, 6, and 11, we have, if you use 20 megahertz channels, there's 20 or so channels that you can pick from in 5 gigahertz and all not be overlapping. Where if you go with 40 megahertz, then there's like 10 channels. 80 megahertz, there's like 5 channels. So the wider you go, the less channels you have before you start overlapping.
I was going to say, are they all insulated like you're saying?
Yeah, there is some buffer. When you go into channel sizes, you can pick channels that are non-overlapping. And when you go with wider channels, the more bandwidth you can transmit. So a 20 megahertz channel can do X, and 80 megahertz can do 4X. So there could be huge bandwidth increases by going to larger channels. But those are really only available on 5 gigahertz. Wireless AC versus wireless N. I'm not going to talk about A, B, G because they're all the legacy of the crap. Forget about them. If you have equipment that is still A, B, G, get rid of it. It's trash. It's worthless at this point. The minimum equipment that you want to even be running nowadays is wireless N. It is compatible in the 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. It is also backwards compatible to A, B, and G. So if you're running a wireless N access point, your older clients can connect to that access point and still be able to transmit and receive data on that older access or on that newer access point. And then it peaks out at its modulation of 64 QAM, which that's a little basically how much data it can transmit in a given amount of spectrum. Theoretically, you can get 600 megabits error rate on wireless N. However, effectively, you'll never ever see that speed. Only in a lab, in a Faraday cage, in a very controlled setting will you ever see anything close to that. Realistically, you'll pop out at about 150 megs of actual transfer on wireless N. Wireless AC is the newest spec that is commonly available right now. And it only works in 5 gigahertz. So if you have a wireless AC access point, it's 5 gigahertz is running at AC, but it's 2.4 is still running at N because AC does not support anything other than 5 gigahertz.
Well, then how is it backwards compatible with N?
It's backwards compatible to N only. Because N clients are also 5 gigahertz. So if you have a 5 gigahertz wireless N client, they can connect. If you have a 5, and connect at that better speed. But if you have a 2.4 gigahertz client, the maximum they're going to be able to achieve is wireless N specifications. Some of that's changing in the future with AX, but that's out of the scope. And it I don't know why that's wrong. It peaks out at 256 QAM, so they made the modulation a lot better, allowing you to transmit more data in the same amount of time. And again, this maximum data rate, you'll never ever see it in your life, but this is what it can theoretically do. in real world, off of a cell phone, off of a good access point, you can hit about 300, 350 meg. So one of the biggest things when making decent wireless is picking a good Wi-Fi channel. You want to try to pick a channel that minimizes noise from other people. So here's a couple different tools. Here's this acrylic Wi-Fi, which is a Windows-based tool, down here in the lower left. And on the side is Wi-Fi Analyzer and Android. Both are free, and both will show you roughly the same information, just different form factor. And so what you can see in this chart right here is that if I was going to assign a new access point on 2.4, I'm kind of screwed. There's a lot of access points already, a lot of noise. But if I had to get it there, I'd probably put it on 11 because that has of the access points that are already on 11, they're the lowest level. Basically, they're the weakest signal already on 11. So I absolutely don't want to put it on 6 because that is the strongest one nearest to me. So I would pick up the most amount of interference if I was to select channel 6.
Is that what it's, the color and the envelope are indicating, the noise and the signal?
So the color is basically just so that you can see the difference between different SSIDs or wireless networks. Basically, it's how far up the scale is basically how strong the signal is.
It's not going to be the color.
Well, it's so on here on the side, it's got a scale, -20 to -90, and the higher up the scale, so the closer to 0 the number is, the higher the signal strength is on that particular access point. And so I want to avoid that one. So I want to go to a channel that looks better. In this case, it's 11. Ideally, I wouldn't actually be putting anything on 2.4 because, well, it's the trash band. So what do you do when you need more coverage than a single home access point or router would provide? Some people would say mesh, some people would say repeaters, some people say moving the router around the house. All of those are mediocre attempts to fix the issue. The best thing to actually do is to put multiple access points. So not just one, but you put one on one corner of the house, and put another one on the opposite corner of the house, so that at all points within the house you can see a good signal strength. What I generally recommend for a normal 1,500, 2,000 square foot house is one on opposite corners. So one in the front, like front right corner, and one in the back rear right corner. So basically the furthest away from each other while still in the house. The next thing is, whenever possible, run a cable to that run a cable to every access point. The reason is when you start doing mesh or repeaters, all of that adds latency, it adds hops, it requires more wireless hops, so that degrades the speed, the transfer rates, it adds latency, it creates jitter, it degrades the performance, and you'd be like, well, why is this not working? I went and bought more repeaters. That's not the fix. Run a cable is the ultimate fix. It's hard to get faster than cable. One big thing is don't use separate names for each access point. I see a lot of these stupid repeaters that will do, Linksys as the main network, and then Linksys-ext for extend as the second network. And if you want to connect to the extender, you have to manually change to connect to the extender. So when you walk between the coverage areas, it requires manual intervention for you to tell your device, your phone, your laptop, to connect to the other one. Well, if you set the same name, also known as SSID, so that's the visible name, the same password and the same security settings, you will be able to roam within the house without having to do manual intervention.
Now, can you do that on like a range extender? Because that's what we have, like just one router, but then we have, you can't really get a good signal upstairs, so we had an extender that you just plug into the wall, and we have it actually over like a dash XD.
Yeah, you are finding the exact problem I'm talking about,
Right.
because to connect to that extender, you have to manually tell your device to do that.
But it's not like an I wasn't sure that it was like its own router, you know?
No, what those do is when you connect to that extend network and you go to transmit data to the internet, it goes from your laptop to the extender. The extender will then transmit it wirelessly to the router and then off onto the internet.
So we can like duplicate our network name on the extender without any problems?
If the settings allow it.
Okay, see that's the thing, I was kind of like assuming that.
Ideally, you'll get rid of that extender, run an Ethernet cable there, and then put a second access point. And that will be the ultimate solution for you. You also have to pick different channels. So you can't have both your access points on the same channel. They need to be on different channels. That allows your phone or your device or whatever to be able to roam from one access point to the other. And this is less of an issue in a home environment, but make sure they're on the same subnet, so that if they're not on the same subnet, when you go to connect to that second access point, it will have to pick up a new IP address, which will cause buffering. It will cause connections to drop. What was that? You potentially could have different. It depends on how the routing is and if there's a firewall between them. The best thing to do is just have them on the same subnet, have them on the same network, so that there is no, basically the IP address that works, the IP address that the phone gets on one access point will work on the second access point. And I keep talking about access points. It's basically what it is. If it's up on a ceiling, it looks like a smoke detector. These happen to be Ubiquiti. What's nice is they have PoE, which is my next topic. PoE is basically power over Ethernet. It allows me to run a single cable to my access point and be able to power it and provide it data. That also means I don't have to locate it near an access point. I don't need to get an electrician out to install an outlet. All I have to be able to do is be able to run Ethernet. Standard Cat5e or 6, run that, and you can then put this on your ceiling, and it looks aesthetically good. It doesn't look like some trashy thing with antennas hanging out the bottom. It looks clean. Yes, the power over Ethernet works the same distance as Ethernet. So it's 100 meters. So roughly 330 feet, you can run power and data to your access point. Most homes are not hitting 300 feet distance limits. You know, if you do, I'll happily come and consult on you because you're going to need a lot of wireless. Yes. So some of the tips to make better wireless is do PoE whenever possible, because that allows for, basically you can place the access points where you need it, not where you can get power. So that allows for better placement. The next is, when possible, centrally manage the access points. And I'll happen to show you the control software for these. This is Unified. The software is free. It's not open source, but it is free. The access points are not bad. The light is 80 bucks to the access point, so they're not expensive.
That would basically like get everything that operates under the same software.
Yes, so basically the one piece of software will control all the access points and all the interactions. So that allows is basically you can collect statistics on clients. You can it allows better roaming because the software is aware of the client and it can basically tell both APs, hey, I know about this client, it's coming to you. This is the big one. Don't just turn up the power. A lot of novice will go, hey, I turned my wireless transmit power all the way up, and things got worse. Yes, that's normal. The reason is when you speak to an access point, it's actually a two-way conversation between your device. And so when you turn the power up on an access point, it'll be like you standing on the stage with a megaphone. Your client is a member in the audience of the stage, and he's trying to whisper back to you because the cell phones can only transmit at so high of levels. And so you can end up with a situation where the client can hear the access point, but the access point can't hear the client. And so what you have to do is if you turn the power levels down a little bit on the access point, it will then become a balanced relationship so that at the point when the client stops hearing the access point is roughly the point when the access point stops hearing the client.
It's like, damn it, Mike, bro, you're trying to do a presentation here.
And the next is use dual band whenever possible. And when you do use dual band, use the same SSID. Don't do something 2.4, something 5, because then that requires manual intervention to switch between them. Where if you use dual band, your phone will pick which one it thinks is the best. There are some techniques that you can use to help the client think what is the best. One good tip to do is when you're setting up a dual band access point, put the power level of 2.4 a little bit lower than 5, because as we remember earlier, 2.4 reaches further, transmits further than 5 gigahertz. By turning the 2.4 levels down below 5 gigahertz, it makes them appear equal to the client. Was that? Yeah, it roughly makes the distance equal by turning the 2.4 down lower than the 5. And then again, that's why I always use dual band, because it allows your client to select the best. Here's the control software. Connection timed out, hold on.
What does that mean?
My connection to the controller timed out, so I just got to refresh it.
Everything's fine, it's not like that.
Yeah, no, it's just my connection between my laptop and the controller at my house. So here's the overview of the controller. So you can see all the wireless statistics.
Control plus.
So here you can basically see that right now I have 2 clients that are on my network. Right here, there's 2 wireless clients. Both of them are on 2.4, and I can see which access point they're connected to. So one is on the studio access point, and one is on the container access point. So I can look with the software and basically see where the clients are. I can also see where the traffic is. So I can see that 60% of the traffic, roughly, is on the studio. Or I can also look down here and basically see which of my clients is the most active, which is the most active access point. Something that I like that the Ubiquity system does. This is called DPI, Deep Packet Inspection, and it basically gives you a breakdown of your traffic and what it was doing. So you can see that my family does a lot of streaming video, a lot of Netflix streaming video, and so it will even break it down to, you know, the difference between YouTube and Netflix, the difference between Valve, so this would be Steam, versus. So it's looking at more than just the access point. It's also looking at the domain name. It's looking at certificates. It's looking at DNS requests.
I was going to say, is that electronic arts? Is that like a Call of Duty or something?
It could be on there's also Origin. You can even break down to how much traffic was GitHub, how much was Facebook, how much was SSH, how much was Gmail, how much was Windows updates. And what's even more interesting that I find is when you break it down into what is a particular device doing. So I can basically see that living room is actually a Roku for me. But if I click on it, I can see that this particular client is doing Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, which makes sense. It's a Roku.
I was going to say, this is almost marketing software. You know what I mean? Like, you can really get a read on your demographics from this.
And then here's where you can basically modify your devices. And so this comes back to the centrally controlled, because when I want to change something like the Wi-Fi, if I want to make a new wireless network, I can type it right here, hit save, and automatically all the access points are going to get that same configuration. I don't have to log into each device and tell it to do something. It's all done automatically.
So it won't boot any of your devices off the network when you create a new one?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, it won't disconnect any of them from the wireless. You go in and create. Like, are you creating a separate network or
Well, say if I want to make a guest network, if I want to make a temporary guest network, I could then hit save, and now there's going to be a separate wireless network.
You're saying that all your devices will pick it up.
Yes. Yeah. So basically, all the access points will then get this configuration and basically start transmitting it. So I don't have to log in to the actual device. When you have a single AP, but if you have 1,000 access points.
I remember scanning for networks in an apartment.
Yes.
And you get 8 of them, 9 of them.
Yeah, exactly. And this will allow you to configure all of the access points equally. You can basically see what your wireless clients are. One of the newer features is it will even break down into what type of device is it. So I happen to know this bottom device is my wife's cell phone. So I can go, it's an Android device, or it's a Roku device. It allows you to get a lot of visibility into the wireless clients on your network. And something else when you were talking about the, let me find it. I'm not used to this much Zoom. Here it is. So this basically allows me to show my neighboring access points. And then I can sort by signal and then break it out. And I can basically say this access point is seen by 3 different, or this is my neighbors. I can see his access point from 3 different of my access points. And so I can start to triangulate where that is, because I go, hey, it's strongest on this access point and weakest on this access point. So it's somewhere in that direction. And so this can be, if you're running in a corporate environment, this can be a godsend to help help narrow down those rogue access points. So they, some employee thinks he's the hot shit and wants to fire up his own access point. This is how you can use this tool to help track it down. Exactly. So that's the majority of it. This is the Unify software. So this is the software that runs these access points, and the software is free. So you just have to buy the hardware.
So once you buy that, you get that.
Exactly. And the access points again. This happens to be their Pro, which is like 120, but they have a Lite, which comes in at about $80.
What different features do they have between the Lite and the Pro? Is it worth it? It's only $45.
So for the average home environment, it's not worth the money. For an environment like a work environment or something like that, where you have a lot of devices, the Pros have more processor, more memory, so they can handle more clients. In a typical home environment, it's not an issue. And honestly, you would be better off getting 2 Lites than 1 Pro. Well, thank you.